It was Thanksgiving morning, and I had barely slept the night before. The cold air had crept through the thin walls of my small house again, and the heating hadn't kicked in like it used to. I wrapped myself tighter in my old woolen shawl as I stirred the pumpkin filling on the stove. My hands ached, not just from the cold, but from years of scrubbing floors and washing windows. Quiet work that no one ever noticed, but which kept me going. I was tired. Tired in the way only someone who's held on for too long can be. But today was different. Today my son was coming. My David. I hadn't seen him in 4 months. Every time I spoke to him on the phone, he sounded busier than before. Always some meeting or some investor pitch. I understood. He had built something out of nothing. From our little garage back when he was a teenager tinkering with wires to now a multimillionaire tech consultant. I was proud, so proud that it hurt. Not because he forgot about me, but because I missed the boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the field and promise to buy me a big house one day. I'd prepared his favorite dishes, mashed potatoes with extra butter, green beans the way his father used to like them, and my famous spiced pumpkin pie. I had even skipped buying my medication this month to afford the ingredients. That was fine. I had done worse to keep us fed when David was young. What was one more sacrifice? When the doorbell rang, my heart jumped. I wiped my hands on my apron, straightened my back, and opened the door with a smile that nearly cracked from the cold air outside. There he was, my son. He looked so sharp, so polished, like he'd stepped out of a magazine. His hair neatly combed back, wearing a watch that probably cost more than my car. And beside him she stood, Victoria, his wife, always elegant, always distant. "Mom," David said, opening his arms for a brief hug. "It smells amazing in here." "Come in," I said softly, trying to hold back tears. "You must be cold." Victoria smiled with her lips, not her eyes. "It's always cozy here." We moved to the small dining room. David chatted about business, new expansions, tech trends I didn't understand, and his latest trip to Europe. Victoria mentioned how beautiful Paris was in the fall, and how the Italian leather couch she'd ordered didn't quite match the new marble in their living room. I smiled and nodded, even though I barely followed along. All I could think about was how the electric bill was due next week, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to pay it. Then, as I placed the pumpkin pie on the table, something strange happened. David leaned back in his chair, smiling. "Mom," he said casually, "how have you been enjoying the lake house I gave you?" I paused, pie server in hand, confused. What lake house?" He laughed. "Come on, the house on Lake Morrison? I had it transferred to your name 2 years ago on your birthday. You always said how peaceful you felt near the water." My throat went dry. The room felt like it tilted sideways. "David," I said slowly, I never received a lake house." He blinked, the smile fading from his face. "What? That's not possible." Beside him, Victoria stiffened, her fork mid-air. She placed her napkin down and stood up quickly. "Oh, I just remembered I have a call to make. Tomorrow's appointment. I need to confirm it." Her voice was high-pitched, rushed. Something about the way she exited the room made my stomach churn. David looked shaken. "Mom, I had everything handled. My assistant processed the paperwork. The deed, the maintenance, even the monthly payments. You should have been getting $1,500 every month." I stared at him, heart pounding. "I haven't received anything. I've been rationing my pills. Last week I skipped dinner for 2 nights just so I could keep the heat running." He stood up sharply, his chair screeching across the floor. No, I have records. I can pull them up." From the kitchen, we heard Victoria's voice, low and urgent. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel the tension radiating from the other room. I stood slowly and walked toward the doorway, trembling. Victoria was turned away, phone to her ear, no longer speaking. When she heard us behind her, she turned around fast, startled. Her face was red. Everything okay? David asked, but his voice was different now. Cold. Measured. She nodded too quickly. Just dinner plans. He stared at her. Do you know anything about the lake house paperwork? You helped my assistant at the time. Victoria hesitated. Her lips parted, then closed, and in that silence, something inside me shattered. I saw it in her eyes. That flicker of panic. That guilt she couldn't hide anymore. Victoria, I said, calm but firm, where's my house? She opened her mouth again, but no words came out. Just silence. David was already on his phone. I'm calling Rebecca. Wait, Victoria said, quickly, stepping forward. Maybe we should talk about this privately. No, I said, my voice rising. I've eaten peanut butter for dinner while you wore designer coats. You don't get privacy now. David's phone rang. Rebecca, I need you to pull the records for the lake house. Now. He put the call on speaker. Rebecca's voice was clear. Yes, Mr. Harrison. Property at 1247 Lake Morrison Drive. Transferred to Margaret Harrison. Monthly payments of $1,500 sent every month to account ending in 4782. I whispered, my account ends in 9156. David's eyes narrowed. Rebecca, who gave you that account number? Your wife, sir. Victoria called and said your mother's banking info had changed. Victoria froze. Her face collapsed. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. Explain, David said. And in that moment, I realized that everything I had believed for the past 2 years was a lie. That my struggle hadn't been necessary. That help was supposed to have come. But someone had stolen it before it ever reached me. Victoria stood motionless, her lips trembling, mascara clinging to the corners of her eyes. She looked like a child caught red-handed. Except this wasn't candy from a jar. This was 2 years of my life. 2 years of hunger, of sleepless nights, of digging coins out of the bottom of an old cookie tin to afford bread and blood pressure pills. And now here she was silent, cornered. I can't explain, she whispered, but her voice barely reached above the hum of the refrigerator. Then explain, David said flatly. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. My parents, they were going to lose their house. My father's medical bills were mounting. I didn't know what else to do. I thought, just the first month, just one payment. I was going to return it. Return it. I repeated, my voice colder than I knew it could be. You mean steal it, then maybe one day feel generous enough to give back? I didn't steal, she started. You opened a bank account in my name, I snapped. You rerouted payments. You forged documents. You stole a house. David ran a hand over his face, as if trying to scrape away the horror settling into his skin. Victoria, you had access to every legal form through Rebecca. You told her my mother changed her banking info. Why? Victoria looked down. Because you trusted me, she muttered. You trusted me to take care of your mother, and I thought I could fix everything before anyone noticed. David's eyes narrowed. You said you helped coordinate the lake house deed because Mom always wanted to live near the water. That wasn't true, was it? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I sank back into my chair, the room suddenly too bright, too loud. My heart pounded in my ears like a war drum. The betrayal had layers. Not just the stolen money or the fake account. Not just the falsified address or the rerouted payments. It was the fact that she'd smiled at me over dinner, complimented my casserole, and kissed my cheek while knowing I was struggling just to survive. Mom, David said, his voice quieter now. I had no idea. I thought I was helping. I thought you were taken care of. I would have never. I know, sweetheart, I said, though my voice cracked. You didn't know, but she did. David sat down slowly, his jaw clenched. I need to see everything. All the documents. All the emails. I'm calling my lawyer. Victoria reached for him, but he pulled his arm away. Don't touch me right now. She collapsed into the corner of the kitchen, sobbing. But I'd heard those cries before. At Christmas, at birthdays. Always emotional, always dramatic. But never with any truth behind them. They were tools, not feelings. Later that evening, after they'd gone, David to gather documents, Victoria to lock herself in the guest room, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen and stared at my hands. They were rough, cracked, calloused. Hands that had cleaned offices for 15 years. Hands that had raised a boy into a man. Hands that should have been holding knitting needles by the lake, not scrubbing toilets to pay for pills. By the next morning, David had returned. He brought boxes, bank records, emails, signed deeds. We cleared the dining table and started sifting. The first thing that struck me was the forged deed. My name was there in bold letters, Margaret Harrison, signing away on a document I'd never seen before. "This isn't my signature," I said, pointing. "See that M? I always curl it. This one's straight." David compared it to a birthday card I'd signed last year. Side by side, it was obvious. "She forged your signature," he muttered. "God, she forged your damn signature." Next came the bank records. The fake account was opened under my name, but at a bank I'd never even visited. David and I drove there, my hands shaking the entire ride. I clutched my ID and social security card like lifelines. Inside the marble-floored bank, the representative frowned as she scrolled through the computer. "You've never been here before, have you?" "No," I said firmly. She pulled out the signature card from when the account had been opened. Same fake handwriting. Same wrong M. My stomach turned. "This is identity theft," the woman said. "You need to file a police report immediately." But there was more. So much more. David had also sent additional money over the last 2 years. For medical emergencies, holidays, even small gifts. "I sent $500 when I thought you needed glasses," he whispered. $800 for dental work. $1,000 last Christmas. All of it had gone to that fake account. How much? I asked, though I already felt nauseous. He tapped his phone calculator, then went pale. $43,000. I staggered into the nearest chair. $43,000. More money than I'd seen in my life. More than I'd made in 2.5 years. Enough to buy security. Enough to live. We drove next to the address used to open the account. 847 Maple Street, apartment 2B. A decaying building with chipped paint and broken railings. The unit was empty, "For rent" sign in the window. "She probably used it just long enough to establish the address," David said. But I was thinking of something else. How did she get my personal information? David looked pained. "From our home. My office. I keep family documents there, birth certificates, social security info." I closed my eyes. That meant it wasn't just opportunity. It was premeditated. A slow, meticulous theft. That night, we spread out every piece of evidence on my small kitchen table. The same table Victoria had sat at for years, pretending to be family. I felt nothing but cold resolve. David looked up at me, eyes full of guilt. She was the one who suggested the payments. 6 months after Dad died. Said you might be struggling. Said it would be a good gesture. She suggested it. I repeated, ice climbing up my spine. He nodded. She said you'd always wanted a house near water. She found the property. Negotiated the deal. Handled all the forms. She planned it all, I whispered. She made sure I got nothing. David was quiet, but I saw it in his face. The trust he'd once had for her was gone. Now we both saw her for what she truly was. And it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about everything she'd stolen from both of us. The morning after we uncovered the forged documents and the fake bank account, I didn't go to work. It was the first time I'd called in sick in 2 years. My supervisor, Mrs. Henderson, was kind about it, said to take care of myself and come back when I was ready. But she didn't know the truth. No one did. What could I have said? I just found out my daughter-in-law stole $43,000 and an entire house from me. It sounded insane, but it wasn't. It was real. All too real. David came back to my house later that day, his car filled with more paperwork, his face pale and drawn. I could see the way the stress was eating at him. He hadn't shaved. His suit was wrinkled. He looked like a man unraveling. This wasn't just a business crisis. It was betrayal, personal and sharp. We laid everything out on the dining table. Deeds, bank statements, receipts, emails, forged tax forms. It was a mountain of evidence that only grew taller with each passing hour. One thing became horrifyingly clear. The money David had sent wasn't the only thing Victoria had taken. She'd gone further. She had filed tax returns in my name, fake ones, and claimed I was receiving income one never got. "Mom," David said, holding a form and shaking hands, "the IRS has been trying to reach you. They think you're hiding income. You're under investigation for tax evasion." The word struck like a punch to the chest. What? He showed me the documents. They weren't just misfiled. They were deliberately fraudulent. My name, my social security number, my fake address. It was all there. Victoria had claimed deductions, reported income, and filed taxes that made it look like I was swimming in money. "But I filed my real taxes," I said weakly. "I always do. I've never hidden anything." "I know," David said, "but they don't." We were both quiet for a moment. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in, the air shrinking around me. Identity theft, bank fraud, tax evasion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a criminal operation. How much did she really steal? I asked. David didn't answer right away. He used his phone to add up everything. Monthly payments, extra cash transfers, credit card debt in my name, the fraudulent refunds, the value of the lake house. When he looked up, his face was ashen. $78,000. My knees buckled. I sat down before I could fall. 78. "I'm sorry, Mom," David said. "I didn't see it. I should have seen it." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I was still stuck on that number. 78,000. That was over 4 years of my salary. That was a small retirement. That was the difference between desperation and peace. "We need to talk to Mr. Patterson," David said. "My lawyer. He needs to see all of this." By the time we got to his office, the sun had already begun to dip below the horizon. The city looked gray, lifeless. Mr. Patterson welcomed us in, and when we handed over the evidence, his expression changed from polite curiosity to grim determination. "This goes beyond a family matter," he said. "This is full-scale fraud." He flipped through the documents with practiced speed. "Your daughter-in-law used your identity to open not one, but 3 accounts. She applied for credit cards. She took out a personal loan. She even claimed you as a dependent on her taxes to get extra refunds." "She what?" I whispered. "Yes, and the IRS is auditing all of it. They've been sending notices to the fake address, Maple Street. You've never responded, so now they're assuming guilt." David looked like he was going to be sick. "Can we fix this?" "Yes," Mr. Patterson said, "but it's going to be a process. We'll need to involve law enforcement. This is no longer just about returning the money. It's a criminal matter now." "What happens to Victoria?" I asked. "If found guilty," he said, "she could go to prison." I didn't respond right away. The word prison felt too big, too final. I thought about Victoria, how she looked that night at dinner, flushed and panicked. I thought about her wiping her tears with the same hands that had signed my name on documents and stolen my future. Was she truly sorry, or was she only sorry she got caught? "And her family?" I asked. "They've been living in my house." "They'll be forced to vacate," Mr. Patterson said. "If they didn't know the money was stolen, they may not face charges. But they won't get to keep what was bought with fraud." David clenched his jaw. "Where is Victoria now?" "She's still at the lake house," Mr. Patterson said. "Our investigator confirmed she's been staying there since Thanksgiving." Of course she had. She ran straight to the life she built with my stolen money. That afternoon, David and I drove to Lake Morrison. I had never seen the house in person. It was supposed to be mine, but I hadn't even seen a photo. As we pulled into the long driveway, my breath caught in my throat. It was beautiful. A large, ranch-style house with big windows overlooking the lake. The lawn was manicured, the trees tall and golden with the last touch of autumn. It looked like peace, like everything I had ever wanted. Victoria's father opened the door. He looked surprised to see us, then sad. "Oh," he said quietly, "we've been expecting you." Victoria appeared behind him, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her expensive clothes replaced with jeans and a faded sweater. Her face was swollen from crying. "Margaret," she said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything. I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "It started with just one payment. I was going to pay it back before anyone even noticed." "But you didn't," David said. "You took more and more. You opened accounts. You filed false taxes. That's not borrowing. That's fraud." Victoria's mother appeared at the doorway, eyes full of tears. "We didn't know," she said. "We thought David was just being generous. Victoria told us he wanted us to have the house." I looked at her. I saw the pain in her face, the confusion, and I believed her. "She told the IRS I was hiding money," I said. "She made me look like a criminal." Her mother gasped. "Oh my God! Victoria, what did you do?" Mr. Patterson stepped forward. "You and your family will need to vacate the house within 30 days. Everything purchased with the fraudulent money must be returned or compensated for. The police will be here tomorrow." Victoria looked at David, desperation in her voice. "Please, don't let them arrest me. I'll pay it back. I swear. I'll get a job." David shook his head. "With what experience, Victoria? You've never worked a day in your life. Everything you've had has been stolen from my mother." As we turned to leave, I looked back one last time. The lake shimmered in the fading light. It should have been mine all along, and soon it would be, but it would never feel the same. Not after everything she'd done. The drive back from the lake house was quiet. David kept his eyes on the road, both hands tight on the steering wheel. I sat beside him, arms folded, watching the sun melt into the trees. My mind replayed every word Victoria had said, every lie, every excuse. The sound of her voice begging for mercy still rang in my ears, but it didn't stir any sympathy. I wasn't angry in that moment. I was something else, emptier than I'd ever felt, as though all the trust and love I'd once had for her had been drained out of me and replaced with silence. When we got home, David sat down with Mr. Patterson's legal forms and began the process of reclaiming what was mine. The house, the money, the identity she'd stolen, everything was being transferred back. It was long, cold paperwork, full of legal language I didn't understand. But David walked me through it gently, never once losing patience. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was my shield. Days passed, then weeks. The police arrested Victoria without incident. She was handcuffed at the lake house and taken into custody while her mother cried in the background and her father simply stared the ground. She didn't fight it, didn't scream, didn't protest. Maybe she knew it was inevitable. Her parents moved out quietly. Her brother helped pack the boxes, his face pale and his eyes hard. I heard later they'd gone to Arizona to live with a relative. I didn't hate them. I couldn't. They were pawns in her scheme, fooled like David and me. They'd lived in luxury without realizing it was built on theft. 3 months later, on a gray February afternoon, David and I sat in a courthouse hallway waiting for Mr. Patterson. The air smelled of old paper and dust, and people's footsteps echoed off the tiled floor. I stared at the walls, feeling numb. David turned to me. "You sure you want to be here for this?" "I need to see it end," I said softly. Mr. Patterson stepped out of the courtroom a few minutes later with a slight nod. "She signed everything," he said. "No contest. The divorce is finalized. Her sentence stands." Victoria had been sentenced to 18 months in prison for fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. Not nearly enough time for what she took, but long enough to take away her freedom. And maybe, just maybe, her illusions. All assets purchased with stolen funds revert to their rightful owners, Mr. Patterson said. The house is yours, Margaret. The fake accounts have been frozen. Once we go through the restitution process, we expect the total recovery to be about $95,000. $95,000. I had spent most of my life counting quarters at the grocery store, passing on new shoes, and choosing between gas and groceries. Now, almost by accident, I had more money than I'd ever imagined. But I didn't feel rich. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a survivor. That money wasn't a prize, it was a repair. Compensation for 2 years of pain, silence, and humiliation. David walked me to the car afterward. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. It's over, but it still feels like I'm waiting for something to fall apart. He opened the door for me. Nothing's falling apart anymore, Mom. Not this time. That night, I sat on the porch of the lake house. The real one, finally mine. I wrapped myself in a thick blanket, sipped tea, and stared out at the water. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, quiet and steady, as if it had been waiting for me all along. It was beautiful, but I didn't feel at home. Not yet. The rooms still held shadows of people who never should have been there. The furniture wasn't mine, the paint on the walls wasn't my taste, and the memories weren't mine either. But it was a beginning. David visited often. He brought groceries, repaired the porch railing, and insisted on calling every evening. You don't have to check on me every day, I told him once, laughing as he unpacked a bag of apples and cinnamon rolls. I know, he said, but I missed too much already. I'm not missing anything else. He meant it. The cold businessman who used to call once a month had been replaced by the son I used to know. Thoughtful, present, real, and maybe that was the only good thing Victoria hadn't been able to steal. Eventually, we started working through the details of restitution. The fake accounts had gained some interest, and the tax fraud led to unexpected refunds once corrected. David hired a financial advisor for me, a woman named Lorraine, sharp, kind, and patient. She explained that once everything was untangled, I would have enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. You don't need to go back to work, she told me. You've earned your rest. That word, rest, hit me like a wave. I had never imagined retirement. I thought I would die cleaning floors, one hallway at a time. But now I didn't have to. Still, something inside me resisted it. I wasn't used to ease. I wasn't used to being taken care of. Just try, David said one morning as he replaced the old doorknobs in the hallway. Let the house become yours. So I did. I planted herbs in the kitchen window, replaced the old furniture with soft chairs I picked out myself, painted the living room walls a warm shade of honey, hung pictures of David as a child, of my husband, of me at 20 standing in a sunflower field. I added little pieces of my life to every corner until the house stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like home. The town changed its tune too. People who used to glance at me with pity now waved when I walked past. Some offered casseroles or compliments. A few even apologized for not reaching out sooner. Of course, not everyone was kind. Some whispered. Some gossiped. A few acted like I'd won some kind of lottery. Well, at least it worked out in the end, one neighbor said. I wanted to scream. Worked out? No, it didn't work out. I was robbed. Betrayed. I nearly lost everything. What I had now wasn't a happy ending. It was recovery, survival, but I said nothing. I just smiled and moved on. The first night I finally felt peace was the night I sat by the lake as the sun dipped low. The wind was soft. The ducks paddled near the shore. I had a cup of tea in one hand and a wool blanket over my knees. And I was alone, truly, peacefully alone. And for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't afraid. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. No need to rush. No time clock to punch. No floors to scrub before the office workers arrived. For the first time in over 2 decades, I didn't have to hurry. I sat up slowly in my warm bed, sunlight pouring through the curtains, and just listened to the quiet. Not silence, exactly. The lake had its own sounds. Birds calling, soft rustles in the trees, the occasional splash of water. But it was peaceful, the kind of quiet that settles your bones. I moved through the house barefoot, letting my toes feel the cool wooden floors. The home still smelled faintly of cinnamon and paint. The furniture was mine now, simple, soft, and chosen by me. No more fancy things that didn't feel right. No more cold, magazine-perfect pieces. Just cozy armchairs, warm rugs, and a little kitchen with blue and white dishes I'd always loved. Later, I sat on the screened porch with a hot cup of tea and watched the ducks again. They'd gotten used to me by now. Every morning, they came closer to the edge of the yard, waiting for crumbs from my toast. I called one of them Peanut. He was the boldest, always first in line. He made me smile, and after the months I'd had, smiling felt like a gift. David called just before noon. He did that every day, no matter how busy he was. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Everything good today?" I chuckled. "David, I'm not 80 yet. You don't have to check on me like I'm made of glass." "Too bad," he said. "I'm doing it anyway." I could hear him smile through the phone. That meant everything. Not the money, not even the house, just that voice. My son, back in my life the way he used to be. "By the way," he added, "Jennifer wants to meet you. Soon." "Jennifer?" His tone shifted, a little shy. "Someone I've been seeing." I told her everything, about Victoria, about what happened. "She knows it all." "Oh, what does she do?" "She's a forensic accountant," he said. "She investigates financial fraud." That made me laugh. "Well, that's oddly perfect." She said the same thing. We talked a bit longer, and after we hung up, I found myself thinking about how far things had come. Just months ago, I was standing in my kitchen, stunned, hungry, and heartbroken. Now I had this. Peace. A house that was finally mine. A son who finally saw me. Not just as someone to send money to, but someone to talk to visit, to laugh with again. And yet, the emotions were complicated. I wasn't happy all the time. Some days, I still woke up anxious, half expecting another letter from the IRS or some other mess left behind by Victoria's lies. Some days, I just sat and stared out the window, wondering how I didn't see through her sooner, wondering how I let it happen. But then I reminded myself it wasn't my fault. Victoria was clever. She didn't break into my home or steal from me by force. She used trust. Smiles. "I just want to help," she'd said. "You've done so much for us." She fooled me because I wanted to believe her. Because I wanted to be loved by the woman my son loved. I wanted to be included, part of the new family. That's what hurt the most. Not the money, not the house, but the lie underneath it all. She looked me in the eye, time after time, and pretended to care while draining every bit of safety I had left. And now, she was sitting in prison. I didn't think about her often, but when I did, it wasn't with hate. It was with sadness. She didn't just steal from me. She stole from herself, from David, from her own parents and siblings. She had a life full of chances and chose the worst path every time. One afternoon, while baking banana bread, I found myself thinking about her family. Her mother and father, the brother with 2 young kids. They'd lost their home, their savings, their peace, just like I had, and it wasn't their fault either. So I sat down, pulled out a simple card from the drawer, and began writing. "Dear Mrs. Stevens, I hope you're settling into your new home. I wanted to say that I don't blame you for what happened. I know you didn't know the money came from me, and I know what it's like to live through something your child caused. Please take care of yourself. Sincerely, Margaret Harrison." I didn't know if I'd ever send it, but it helped to write it, helped to release a little of what I'd been holding on to. That same week, I finally made a decision I'd been thinking about for months. I called Mrs. Henderson, my supervisor at the cleaning company. "This is Margaret," I said. "Oh, my goodness, Margaret. Are you feeling better? Are you coming back soon?" I paused, smiling gently. "Actually, I'm not coming back. I'm retiring." Silence. Then, warm congratulations and a little sadness. "You deserve it," she said. "But we'll miss you." After the call, I sat on the porch again, sipping a glass of wine instead of tea this time. The sky was pink and gold, and the lake was so still it looked like glass. David texted me. "Jennifer wants to cook you dinner this weekend. She says it'll be Italian. That okay with you?" I replied, smiling. "Tell her I love Italian food, and she doesn't have to impress me. Anyone who makes you smile is already in my good books." As night fell, I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, tired, invisible, holding on by a thread. She would never believe this life was possible. Not after everything that had been taken. But somehow here I was, resting, breathing, living again. Victoria had stolen 2 years of my life, but she couldn't steal what came after. A few weeks later, David arrived early one Saturday morning with a small bag of groceries and 2 cups of coffee. He knew the brand I liked now. Strong, a little bitter, with just the right amount of cream. We sat at the kitchen table in our usual spots, quiet for a while, enjoying the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls from the bakery in town. "I have some news," he said, setting his coffee down. I looked up. "Good news, or the kind that needs a deep breath first?" He chuckled. "Good, I think. Maybe both." I raised an eyebrow. "I've been offered a chance to expand the business again, bigger than anything we've done so far. It means more travel, more meetings, but also a chance to build something lasting. And Jennifer, she's offered to come with me if it happens." I smiled. "You seem happy." He nodded. "I am. Scared but happy. I feel like I'm finally doing something with my eyes open, not just chasing success blindly." "That's all I ever wanted for you, David. Not just success. Balance. Peace." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I owe that to you, to everything we've been through." We didn't talk about Victoria much anymore. The investigation was finished. The restitution was processed. The accounts were corrected. The IRS had cleared my name. Mr. Patterson had handled it all with care, and I'd signed more papers in 3 months than I had in my entire life. But occasionally, when something reminded us, an unfamiliar number on a bank statement, a letter addressed wrong, or a name on a list we didn't expect, her memory would drift back in. "She wrote to me," David said one evening, as we sat on the porch watching the ducks. "Who?" "Victoria. From prison. Just a letter." I didn't say anything, just waited. She apologized again, said she was in therapy, that she's realizing now how broken she was when all this happened. I still didn't speak. "She didn't ask for forgiveness," he added. "At least not in so many words. But I think that's what she meant." I turned my face toward the water. The wind was gentle, brushing my hair like an old friend. "Do you want to forgive her?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "Some days I do. Other days I can't even think about her without getting sick." "That's fair," I replied. He looked at me. "What about you?" I thought for a long moment. I don't know if I'll ever forgive what she did, but I've stopped letting it hurt me. I've stopped letting her steal any more of my days. David nodded slowly. "That's stronger than forgiveness. That's freedom." We sat in silence, wrapped in our own thoughts. The lake shimmered in the fading sunlight, and the porch creaked gently beneath us. It was one of those moments that felt like it belonged in a movie, but it was real, raw, simple. That night, after David left, I wandered through the house, touching the walls, the furniture, the photos I'd hung with my own hands. This home had once been a lie, a symbol of betrayal, but now it was layered with something else, healing. I had filled the shelves with books I actually wanted to read, planted a small herb garden outside the kitchen window, replaced the heavy curtains with sheer ones that let the morning light flood in. I even started writing again, just little stories, thoughts, memories. Nothing special, but they helped me process everything I'd carried. And I finally understood something that had taken me a long time to learn. Home isn't about the building. It's about the safety, the choice, the control over your own life. For years, I had lived in fear of bills, of illness, of being forgotten. Then I'd lived in betrayal, lied to, stolen from, invisible even in my own family. But now I lived in truth. In light. Jennifer came for dinner the next weekend. She was smart, confident, and warm in a way that reminded me of someone who had lived through hard things and come out kinder, not colder. She brought a homemade lasagna and a bottle of wine and didn't try to impress me. She just talked like a real person. When David excused himself to take a business call, Jennifer turned to me and said, "He talks about you all the time, you know. How strong you are. How you survived something that would have broken most people." I laughed softly. I didn't feel strong at the time. I just didn't have a choice. "Sometimes that's what strength looks like," she said. We clinked our glasses gently, and I found myself liking her even more. Later, after they left, I curled up in my reading chair and thought about the future. Not in the way I used to, full of worry and what-ifs, but with quiet hope. I didn't need big things anymore. I had enough. More than enough. I had my name back. My home. My son. My peace. The lake house no longer felt like a stranger's dream. It was mine now, down to the creaky steps and the hummingbirds that visited every morning. And while Victoria had stolen 2 years of my life, I had the rest of it back. The calm, the quiet, the freedom, the life I was meant to live. Spring arrived at the lake house gently, like it had waited until I was ready to notice it. The trees began to bloom with pale green leaves, and tiny flowers started peeking through the soil near the porch. Everything felt new, soft, forgiving. The air smelled like rain and fresh beginnings. It was the kind of season that makes you believe life can start again, even after everything. Every morning, I sat outside with my coffee, a soft breeze brushing my cheeks, and watched the ducks. Peanut now brought along a few more, waddling like he owned the place. I talked to them sometimes. I don't know why. Maybe because it felt good to be heard, without judgment. Maybe because it reminded me I was still here. Still me. David's calls came less often now, but not because he forgot. He was just busy again, in a healthier way this time. He'd made space in his life for someone new, and I saw how careful he was being, checking himself, making sure he wasn't repeating old mistakes. Jennifer kept him grounded. She didn't let him float too high above the world. I liked that about her. One Saturday afternoon, David invited me to a small cookout by the lake. Nothing fancy, just grilled chicken, potato salad, lemonade. We laughed, played music, and even danced a little in the grass when no one was looking. I hadn't danced in years, not since before my husband passed, and for a few minutes I felt light again, like grief and betrayal had loosened their grip on my shoulders. "You look happy," David said later, while we packed up the folding chairs. "I am," I replied. "Not every minute, but more than I used to be." "You've changed," he said thoughtfully. "I had to." He didn't ask what I meant, and I was glad. Some things didn't need explaining. A few weeks after that, I got a letter in the mail. It had no return address, but I knew the handwriting immediately. Neat, careful, and just a little shaky. Victoria. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside, she wrote that prison had changed her, that she was going to group therapy, learning how to be honest. For the first time in her life, she said. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she said she hoped one day, maybe, I'd understand why she did what she did. I folded the letter and tucked it away in the drawer. I didn't need to respond. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I didn't hate her anymore. Hate is heavy, and I'd carried it long enough. Instead, I prayed, quietly, that she would mean the words she wrote, that she'd come out better. Not for me, not even for David, but for herself. Summer crept in with heat and hummingbirds. I spent my days in the garden, knees in the dirt, hands busy with tomatoes, mint, and lavender. I never knew how good it felt to grow things, to make something with your hands and watch it bloom. In the evenings, I read on the porch. Some nights, I'd even write little notes about the day, old memories, short letters I'd never sent. It helped me let go of the parts of life that still stung. Because even though I had peace now, the past didn't vanish. It clung to corners of my mind like cobwebs. Some days it was easier to ignore. Other days it caught me off guard. A song, a scent, the way the wind moved through the trees. One evening, while watching the sun dip into the lake, I found myself thinking about who I used to be. That tired woman in the cold kitchen. The one who skipped meals to save for her pills. The one who kept telling herself, just one more month. It'll get better. I wanted to reach back in time and hug her. Tell her that she wasn't weak. She was surviving. That everything stolen from her would one day return. Not just the money, but her dignity, her freedom, her joy. I still felt the cracks inside me. Some wounds take years to heal. Some might never fully close. But I was learning to live with them. To walk with a limp, so to speak. One of my neighbors stopped me at the market one morning. "You're the woman from the lake, right? The one whose daughter-in-law stole everything." I paused, then nodded. She smiled kindly. "Well, I just wanted to say you carry it well. You don't look like someone who lost anything at all." I smiled back. "That's because I didn't lose. I just had to wait a little longer to win." She laughed and we parted ways, but her words stuck with me, not because of the compliment, but because she saw me as someone whole again. That night, I stood at the edge of the water and whispered to the stillness, "Thank you. For the pain, for the fight, for the second chance." I was older now, not just in years, but in truth, in understanding. But I was still here, still standing, and that in itself was enough. The air had begun to cool again, the first hints of autumn brushing the tops of the trees. I could smell it, wood smoke from somewhere across the lake, dry leaves crumbling underfoot. It was the same season when everything had fallen apart exactly a year ago, and now everything felt still, not completely healed but calm, like a lake after a storm. The ripples were fading, but you could still see where the waves had been. I had settled into a rhythm. Morning tea on the porch, a little gardening, short walks to the nearby store for fresh bread or apples, then reading or writing in the afternoons. My home had slowly become mine, not just legally but emotionally. The paint colors were ones I'd chosen. The curtains soft yellow. The old photo of me and David at the county fair had replaced a cold abstract painting that once hung in the hallway. It was no longer a house I stepped into cautiously. Now, when I unlocked the front door, it felt like a hug. David visited every Sunday without fail. Sometimes Jennifer came too, bringing something homemade and always thoughtful, chicken soup, almond cookies, or thick slices of banana bread with walnuts. She never tried too hard, never treated me like a fragile old lady. She simply came as herself, and that was enough. One Sunday afternoon, we sat in the living room after lunch, watching the wind move through the trees. David looked thoughtful. "I've been meaning to ask," he said. "What are you going to do with the money?" I glanced up from my knitting. "The restitution." He nodded. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "For now, I'm just breathing, letting it sit there, knowing it's there helps me sleep." He nodded, understanding. "You deserve to enjoy it, though. You know that, right?" "I do," I said softly, "but I'm not chasing anything anymore. I've had enough chasing." He smiled. "Well, if you ever want to travel or try something new, just say the word." "Maybe one day," I said. "For now, I like my ducks and my tea." He laughed and leaned back, letting the afternoon light settle across his face. That laugh, my boy's laugh, sounded more relaxed than it had in years. Maybe ever. A few days later, I received another letter. This one wasn't from Victoria. It was from the IRS. I opened it slowly, heart thumping like it used to back when every envelope felt like a threat. But this time it was a confirmation. My record was clean. The audits had cleared. I owed nothing. I stared at the piece of paper, hardly breathing. Then I folded it, slid it into the drawer, and exhaled. A full breath. A weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying lifted off my shoulders. That evening, I made myself a little celebration dinner: rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes, and a slice of store-bought apple pie. I lit a candle at the table. Just one. It flickered gently, like it was nodding at me. I toasted to the quiet victories, the ones no one sees, the ones that don't make headlines, to surviving, to rebuilding, to choosing peace. The next morning, I finally wrote back to Victoria's letter. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. Victoria, I received your letter. I hope you're truly learning, not just apologizing. You didn't only take money. You took trust, time, and security. But I've taken it all back, and I'm rebuilding what you tried to ruin. I won't forget what you did, and I won't forgive it easily. But I'm not carrying the weight of your choices anymore. That's yours to hold now. Margaret. I sealed the envelope, but I didn't rush to the post office. I kept it on the table for a week. Then one day I walked it down the street and dropped it into the blue mailbox. And that was it. It wasn't for her, really. It was for me. One final breath before I closed that chapter forever. Around mid-October, I decided to do something small for myself. I took a trip to the next town over. Just a one-day bus ride. I walked through a craft fair, bought myself a soft scarf, and had lunch at a diner with a corner booth and pie that tasted like the kind my mother used to make. It wasn't a grand adventure, but it was mine, and that made it perfect. When I got back home, the lake was golden with sunset. The porch light turned on automatically. The wind had scattered leaves across the steps, and I didn't even mind sweeping them. Everything felt like it belonged again. And me? I belonged too. David called that night, just checking in. We didn't talk long, just a few updates, a few laughs. Before hanging up, he said, "Mom, you sound good. Peaceful." I smiled, sitting in the armchair near the window, wrapped in my new scarf. "I am," I said. "Finally." He was quiet for a second. Then, "I'm proud of you." That caught me off guard. "I didn't do anything special," I said. "You rebuilt your life after someone tried to destroy it," he replied. "That's more than special." I didn't know what to say, so I just thanked him and promised I'd see him Sunday. After we hung up, I stared out at the lake again. It wasn't just beautiful anymore. It was mine. All of it, my life, my story, my peace. And no one could ever steal it again. The days grew shorter, and the trees began to shed their colors in a slow, graceful dance. Autumn had fully arrived, and with it came something I hadn't expected: contentment. Not the kind you force yourself to feel, not the one you pretend to have because people expect you to move on. This was quiet, steady contentment that lived in the smallest places, in a warm cup of tea, in the rustle of leaves outside the window, in the simple fact that I didn't have to fight anymore. I had finally stopped looking over my shoulder. My days had a rhythm now. I woke when I wanted to, walked when I felt like it, wrote when the thoughts were too heavy to carry alone. Some nights, I still sat on the porch and let the memories roll in like waves, but they didn't drown me anymore. I let them pass like clouds across a calm sky. One morning, while pulling weeds from the side garden, I found an old stone beneath the soil. It was smooth and round, buried deep. For some reason, I washed it off and placed it on the porch railing. Something about it reminded me of myself, weathered, overlooked, but still here. Later that week, Jennifer called. Not David. Jennifer. "Margaret," she said brightly, "I know you don't love big gatherings, but would you consider coming to a small dinner we're having? Just a few people from David's work. I'd love for them to meet you." I hesitated. "I promise it's nothing fancy." "No pressure," she added gently. "I'll think about it," I said, and I meant it. It was strange, having someone else in David's life who cared enough to include me. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. Victoria had always made me feel like an accessory, something to keep in the background. Jennifer made me feel seen, and that alone softened my heart toward her in a way I hadn't expected. The dinner was quiet, tasteful, and kind, just like she promised. No flashy displays, no awkward questions, just laughter, gentle music, and conversations about ordinary things, books, food, funny stories from work. One of David's colleagues said something that stayed with me. "You're the reason David is who he is, you know. He talks about you all the time." I blinked. "He does." "All the time," she said with a smile. "Says you're the strongest person he knows." That night, as I lay in bed, I kept thinking about those words. I hadn't felt strong during the worst of it. I'd felt weak, broken, ashamed. But maybe strength isn't about never falling. Maybe it's about how many times you get back up and how you carry yourself afterward. Winter eventually crept in again, just as it had a year before, but this time it didn't scare me. I had warm blankets, a working heater, and money in the bank. I didn't have to choose between medicine and groceries. I didn't have to wonder whether I mattered. One snowy afternoon, I received a letter from the prison. Victoria again. This time, I read it without hesitation. She told me she was being released early for good behavior, with only 3 months left to serve. She was planning to move in with an aunt in another state and look for work. She didn't ask for anything, no contact, no second chances. But she thanked me for the last letter, for not responding in anger, for not dragging her parents into the legal mess, even when I had every right to. "I know I can't fix what I did," she wrote, "but I'm trying to be someone who doesn't hurt people anymore." I folded the letter carefully and slid it into a drawer with the first one. That would be the last, I decided. I had no hatred left for her, but I also had no space for her in the life I'd rebuilt. That chapter was done. In February, exactly 1 year and 3 months after the Thanksgiving dinner that broke everything open, I did something I never thought I would. I hosted my own dinner. Just a few people, David, Jennifer, Mrs. Henderson from the cleaning company, and 2 kind neighbors who'd helped me during the renovations. We had roast chicken, cornbread, baked apples, and plenty of laughter. No tension, no lies, no hidden pain beneath polite smiles. At the end of the meal, David raised his glass. "To Mom," he said. "To the toughest woman I've ever known." I laughed and shook my head, embarrassed. "To surviving," he added, "and to finally thriving." We clinked glasses. Even Jennifer looked a little misty-eyed. After they all left and the house grew quiet again, I stood at the window looking out over the snowy lake. The moon cast silver shadows across the surface, and the wind whispered through the bare branches like a lullaby. Everything was still. Everything was mine. And after all the struggle, all the betrayal, all the nights I thought I might not make it, here I was. Safe, strong, home. The 1-year mark arrived with a soft breeze and birdsong. It was the first true spring morning. Clear skies, a calm lake, and sunlight warming the front porch railings like the world itself had decided to begin again. I stood there with my tea, wrapped in my favorite shawl, and let myself feel it all. The peace, the weight lifted, and something I hadn't felt in a long time. Wholeness. It had taken everything in me to get here. To this life. To this stillness. A full year since the lies unraveled at my dinner table. Since I learned the truth that shattered my trust, but somehow rebuilt my soul. A year since the woman who once smiled across from me with her polished manners and carefully painted face turned out to be the person who stole my security, my health, and my peace. And yet I'd survived. Not just survived, I'd grown. David arrived later that morning, carrying a picnic basket and that goofy grin that reminded me of his younger self. He had Jennifer with him, and they walked toward the dock like they belonged there. And they did. "Happy Freedom Anniversary," David said with a smirk. "Is that what we're calling it?" I laughed. He nodded. "You earn every bit of it." We ate by the water, our shoes off, letting the grass press between our toes. Jennifer made lemon cake, and I brought my homemade peach jam. No formal table settings. No tension. Just family, comfort, and laughter. At one point, David leaned back on his elbows, looked at the lake, and said, "I think about everything that happened, and sometimes I still can't believe it." "Believe it," I said gently. "It happened, but so did this." He looked at me, eyes full of quiet understanding. "You never gave up." "I didn't know how to," I replied. Giving up would have meant letting her win. He nodded. "I don't think I could have done what you did." "Yes, you could have," I said. "Because you did. You believed me. You stood by me. You fought with me. That's what saved us both." Jennifer squeezed his hand. "Some people break under betrayal," she said. "Others bend and then rebuild stronger." I smiled at that. It was true. Later that evening, after they left, I sat alone on the porch, watching the ducks paddle across the lake. The sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and lavender. I let the moment wash over me, slowly. I didn't want to rush it. I wanted to remember. Because the truth was, Victoria didn't just steal money. She stole time, comfort, the belief that I mattered. But she couldn't take away who I was. She didn't know my strength came not from what I had, but from what I'd endured. I'd lived through nights without heat, meals without food, days without rest. I'd given everything to raise a child, and I would have done it all again. The betrayal taught me something no peaceful life ever could. That even when everything is stripped away, money, comfort, trust, your worth remains. No one can steal that from you, not even someone you loved. I looked out at the lake, the water soft as silk beneath the moonlight, and I whispered something out loud. Not to anyone in particular, but to the wind, to myself, to the woman I used to be. You made it. And I had. The lesson I carried from all of it, the one I wish I could place in the heart of every person who's ever been betrayed, is simple. People can take things from you. They can lie, cheat, and leave you broken. But they cannot erase your story. They cannot rewrite your worth. You decide who you are. You choose when the chapter ends. And when you finally choose peace, after walking through fire, it's not just comfort. It's power. As I locked up the house that night and turned off the lights, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel wounded. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt free. And I hope wherever Victoria is, she finally learned something too. That when you take from others to fill your own emptiness, you never feel full. You only leave more emptiness behind. But me? I was full. Of peace. Of clarity. Of life that was truly, finally mine. Now, dear listener, if you've stayed with me this far, thank you. You've heard my whole story. Maybe you've lived something like it. Maybe you haven't. But let me ask you, what would you do if someone you trusted took everything from you? Would you fight? Would you fall? Would you rise again? I did. And if I could, so can you. Because the truth is simple. You're stronger than what tried to break you. Thank you for walking this journey with me. And now, before you go, I'm leaving 2 other stories on the screen. They're both powerful, emotional, and true. I'll be waiting for you there. Until then, take care. Live free. Choose peace.